Call the meeting to order and welcome you all here. Apologies, we have none. None have been received. Confirmation of the order of business. There's no change to the order of business. You'll be aware, of course, the meeting is being recorded for live streaming on the YouTube channel. And a reminder, please, to turn your microphones on before speaking and off before you've finished. After you've finished. Updates to the interest register. Are there any changes to the interest register? Are there any items that may conflict on this particular agenda? We've had no notification of a public forum, so we'll move to confirmation of the minutes of the 25th of September. And I'd ask if there are any changes, amendments or corrections to those minutes.
Mr. Chair, I think I sent a message through that I was actually attending that meeting and it wasn't recorded at the time.
Thank you. Yes, you did, Councillor Noonan, so we will change that to reflect Councillor Noonan's attendance at that meeting. With that change, could I have somebody move that those minutes be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Dahlberg, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Chairperson's report. Just very briefly, I just want to comment on the fact that this was the first meeting with the new quarterly report format, and noting that similar reports will be provided in a more extensive and timely reporting to committees, which is a new development that I think will be useful. But as you'll note from this report, this is a work in progress. Officers are keen to get feedback from all committees, including this one, to continue to ensure that these reports reflect what it is that this committee and other committees want to see. But I just want to thank officers for the work and thinking that's gone into this. I know it's extensive, and I just can't help noting how significantly different our reporting is now to what it was 4 years ago coming to this committee, and I think that it's good to see that sort of continued progress of informing this committee and moving forward other committees. So I'll move that's all I want to say in the Chair's report. I'll move my report be received. Second, thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Is there any comment on that? Not. Those in favour of receiving the report, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 7, audit reports on the long-term plan and the consultation document is page 13. Hello, Jackie. Welcome.
Hello. Well, thank you.
Any updates? Any information you want to provide before?
No, through the chair, nothing new from what was in the report to add. The report simply attaches the audit reports on our consultation document and long-term plan for your review information.
Thank you. So I'll open up the thing for questions relating to this report. Mr. Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Peters. First of all, I'd like to just express my congratulations to everybody involved in this process. I didn't quite understand the magnitude till I read this report, and it looks like a very comprehensive process by both audit and staff, and of course councillors. Fortunately or unfortunately, we weren't part of that process, so observing it at this level is kind of interesting. So look, I just wanted to pass on my express my thanks and just to congratulate everyone on getting through to this point. I think it's reasonably pertinent that we reflect on page 17 in the unmodified opinion that says from Mr. Kearney that there's an effective basis for public participation in the council's decision and the proposed content content of the 2018 to 2028 long-term plan. So that's saying to me it's a good document, and it provided people with a great opportunity to consult. And then further down there it talks about how it was managed well, the process was managed well and went well, which is also good because it's quite a big process. So that's really, really pleasing to read in here. I just had a couple of questions in I suppose the detail of the report on page 22. At 3.3, Mr. Kearney comments that the process to develop the financial model, and then he goes on and talks about several dot points, which when I read through that, I just wondered, and perhaps this is the question, isn't there, presumably everyone in local government is doing this process up and down the country, and it feels to me like we're trying to invent the wheel and do it our way, which may or may not be correct. But is there something that sort of underpins this whole modelling, particularly around the Excel spreadsheets, which is a little bit better and sort of nationally driven at the local government level, which can make it an easier process for us and other councils? So that's the first question, and I've got one more, if I may.
So through the chair, as I understand it, we're developing a model for the next long-term plan will be not based on an Excel spreadsheet, but through a modelling system. Nikki might be better able to answer what the new system will be like.
So through the chair, yes, Jane is correct. We are implementing a module. So it's an LTP module that is a standardised module that's been developed for the software package that we use for the next LTP. So we're implementing that.
Excellent. So I was pretty keen to sort of like get a sense of whether we can relieve those problems, and it sounds like we can, which is excellent. The next question relates to on page 27, and that there's a comment in here. And I just wanted to get a little bit of context on it. It's the first dot point on page 27. It says that there are deferred renewals building on a number of transport areas. And while some of these have been articulated and addressed in the asset management plans, others do not seem to be fully addressed in the AMPs. And then I just sort of extrapolated that out and just had a question which went along the lines of, is there more cost in the asset management plans than what we've actually provided for? And that's probably a question across all of the asset management plans. So I was just looking for, I'm sort of getting the sense that perhaps what our financial model says is might be slightly different to our asset management plans. And if that is the case, are we doing something with that?
Through the chair, I'm not actually entirely sure if there is a difference between the two. I had thought that they lined up. Nikki looks.
So through the chair, there is no difference. I mean, at the end of the day, but because we go back and so the asset management plans are built from the bottom up, but at the end of the day, when we aggregate them all together, it is an affordability issue. And the point that Audit are raising is potentially around deferred renewals, and that really is a real, I suppose at the end of the day, when you're trying to manage to a capital program of $40 million and there are level of service and other projects that have been added, then the renewals are the ones that get bumped. But the AMPs go back and be lined up to the financial model after the long-term plan process. So those have all been back through the committees since the long-term plan was adopted.
Okay, so we're satisfied then that we've got, because you can't keep bumping renewal programs indefinitely, you either got to replace, I would presume. So I suppose the question is, we're obviously comfortable that our renewal program that we do have in place and are paying for is adequate to keep ourselves up to speed.
And that's to be confirmed?
Is that the wrong question?
So through the chair, perhaps I can answer that. The answer to that question is yes. We believe that that what we have in our asset management plan reflects our renewals program for water, sewer renewals, our road pavements, yes.
Okay, thank you. Because I just wanted to draw attention to page 26, about 2/3 of the way down there under infrastructural strategy. I think it's important to note that the auditors pointed out and said, based on our review of the City Council's infrastructure strategy meets most of the key attributes of a sound strategy. So that's also pleasing to see. So the auditors sort of confirming that we do have a sound strategy. So, right, thank you. Through the chair, it's all.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Councillor Dahlberg.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the staff. From 2 years ago, this was just great to see, I've got to say, from my own point. And Mr. Peters has covered off the bits I was interested in, really, about the management comments and updating model strategy. Really, I'm interested in the bit about rates affordability, and that the costings there go from 3.2, 3.9, 3.6. Then the last piece gets an average of 2.3% increase in rates. Are we comfortable that's right, or are we leaving something for a future generation to increase? What's our best estimate on that?
Jane?
So these were the rate increases that were included in the consultation document when we consulted on the long-term plan, and the community responded with their submissions, and the final long-term plan was adopted after taking in submissions into account.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a follow-up, right? Because I see. So I like what we've done, and I like where we're going. I like the modelling, but I think the comment here that it says there uncertainty on the timing of the growth, and I've got to go back to our growth assumptions, gives rise to the rest of the council build demand-driven infrastructure, and projected growth does not occur. So I'm assuming our program at the moment is we're working within the government's expected growth rates, and if it doesn't happen, we're making adjustments in the future. Is that my understanding?
Through the chair, when the census results come out for the most recent census, we'll review our growth rates and make sure that our growth is in line with what we projected, and make any adjustments as we need through an annual plan.
Okay, yeah, just through you, yeah, that seems to me, if there's one challenge in here, is that growth expectation that comes in under infrastructure strategy, addressing impacts of growth. That seems to be through this. And there's one thing that seems to be an assumption that could put us wrong, is that we're expecting that high growth or medium high growth, and it doesn't happen. So as long as we've got a review of this every year or three, and check those growth strategies are right, and we're not building stuff that we don't need, or we're getting too far behind new infrastructure, then I really like the plan we've got here. So thanks to staff.
Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Mayor Rees.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jane, thank you for the work that you and the team have put into the process, working with Audit and preparing the document for the community and for council. Certainly, I concur with Mr. Murray that we've come a long way in the last 4 years, and certainly that's reflected in this report. But I just highlighted exactly the same sections as Mr. Murray, and I just want to come back to a little bit more discussion on those. The first one on page 23, and picking up perhaps a question back to Nikki. Nikki, you commented on that you're implementing a model to address this issue of the manual spreadsheets, and I can see that there's a management comment note in italics in the middle there to say that work is underway towards a new process that does not require manual entry to an Excel spreadsheet. So is that the module that you were highlighting before, implementing a module?
Through the chair, yes, it is. So there's a lot of the recommendation that the audit have made is around having more staff in that area as well. So there's two pieces. There's resourcing within the finance team for the LTP module, for the LTP and annual plan, and we've talked about that previously, that we're splitting the reporting and the planning into two separate roles. But yes, it's the module that they're referring to there.
All right, and so in terms of time frame, when are we anticipating that that'll be operational? Will we have that operational for the annual plan that we're about to start work on?
So through the chair, this is actually the long-term plan module, so it's a 10-year module, and so we're in the process of implementing it. Well, sorry, we will be starting to implement it soon, but you've got to understand it needs to fall between all the other planning that we're doing, so it won't be for this annual plan.
All right, so for this coming annual plan, we'll still be working off manual spreadsheets, essentially, to go through that process. And the reason I'm asking is because obviously my brain's now into the annual plan process, which we've started our work on in terms of the big picture thinking, and we'll come back and work through that later on in December, I think. So I'm just, because what I'm reading in this in the context of this section of 3.3 is that what Audit, essentially, I'm reading this as a governor, Audit is saying to us is, you've got a rather clunky system there, Nelson City Council. It's you found a way to make it work, but it probably needs some, a good practice would say some separation of roles, and that's been addressed, so you're talking about that, but essentially we're probably not, we're working with something that's a bit outdated. Is that the way to describe what we've got? I mean, there do seem to be an awful lot of clip-ons to our model of the financial corolla, if you know what I mean. So it does feel like that from a user point of view at a governance level.
So through the chair, yes, I mean the model, the system that we're using is probably not state of the art, and we are clipping things on to make it better. But the reality is the underlying data is all in a core system. It's just the final pieces of the annual plan process are done in spreadsheets. We do have the resourcing now that there will be a separate review done. And there'll be that separation, but we won't have a system implemented for this annual plan.
Okay, and so I guess the question I then have is why don't we have state of the art? Is that a cost issue? Because I mean that would be a question that the public might ask is, why Nelson City Council don't you have state of the art financial systems?
Through the chair, I don't think I've actually observed any council that has state-of-the-art financial systems, and it is a massive investment. It's something we've talked about before, and potentially if we were going to do it, we'd look to line up with TDC and do a joint implementation on another system. But I know that any other system, because of the complexities around being a unitary authority as well, there are lots of different modules you have to have. You've got dogs, you've got, it's not just the financial modules, it's all the other resource consents, all those other modules you've got to line up. So yes, at some point we will need to make a decision, but the decision up until now has been to try and enhance the system that we've got by taking the improvements like the LTP module and things like that. We've got an annual reporting module that we've used and implemented separately. So it's trying to make the system work for us, but the underlying system's still the same one.
Right, just through again, Mr. Chair. So Nikki, just to get a sense of this, so at the moment, to go to state of the art, and I'm interested in your comment around it's unlikely that they exist at all in the local government, and that's perhaps something that I'll just take back to National Council for some discussion around this in a broader sense as to whether there's a whole of local government system approach that we should be taking for financial prudence reasons. But can you give me a sense of what's a massive cost? So to just in that helpful sense that if I'm thinking about prioritising spend on behalf of ratepayers, I've got a sense of what is a massive cost to go to
through the chair, I think it would probably be in the millions, and it would be the business disruption that would cost you the most. So it would be probably a 3 to 5 year project to roll everything, each module into a new system. So it's probably the business disruption piece that would be the biggest cost.
Right, that's helpful, thank you. Mr Chair, if I can just go to the other questions on page 27. So these are the ones related to the infrastructure strategy. And I read through this and found Audit's comments actually really helpful in the sense that they're saying, well, your AMPs funding doesn't appear to be driven by the AMPs. The funding seems to be through the issues are mainly through a budgetary process. So that makes sense to me in the sense of, we're looking at the ability for the organisation to deliver on capital projects, the rates cap, our debt level cap and how we sit within those ratios. So we bring it all together. But where I guess I want a little bit more clarity is, in the discussion where they talk about the risk of not meeting levels of service, at that point I start to look at that in the sense of, so how will that reflect in our performance review? So if we're setting levels of service in our AMPs, but we're not funding sufficiently to meet those levels of service, how are we going to resolve that? It's a question really for the officers. How do we resolve that discussion? Because we are reporting against levels of service. So as the chair of the Works and Infrastructure Committee works through, or the chair of the Regional Transport Committee works through, surely there shouldn't there be an overt discussion around adjusting the levels of service to then reflect the financial commitment within the strategy?
Chief Executive.
So from my point of view, and I have just discussed with some councillors privately, one-on-one, is that the renewal budgets are virtually untouchable. I suspect what has been happening is because we have been under-delivering on our capital budgets, that some of the renewal projects have probably missed out as well. But it would be very, on my watch, very unusual to be taking renewal projects out of the budget to make things fit. That's for sure. That's not a sustainable model at all.
So just following it, and I'd agree with that. So that's where it starts to concern me, that if it's around renewals, then that needs to be, an overt discussion with the committees with responsibilities for these areas. So there needs to be an absolute tension discussion around if you want to make changes around the wider budgetary constraints, renewals are not your first, or shouldn't be your first pick. So could I just perhaps ask that on the back of this reporting, that there's some discussion just around that particular AMP, just with the relevant chairs, so that they can this commentary can be picked up and discussed, so that they can have a think about what they're going to come back with through the next annual plan. Because if we have got an issue here, then I'd like us to be working to try and address it, and I think those chairs need to be across the content of what's here. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got Councillor Noonan first, then Councillor Courtney.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair. Look, I concur with Mr Murray and the Mayor. That's exactly the paragraph that I had highlighted with some concern. I note that the Audit have stated at the end of that sentence, this issue should be better articulated in the strategy, i.e. tell people what they're actually not getting. If the levels of service are going to drop, which is what it looks like, that we need to have a look at that. I just want to reiterate that this council has concentrated heavily on infrastructure. So I think I'd like to look a little bit back, a little bit further, and see where we dropped the ball, where the ball was dropped, because that has been a focus of this council, in fact a strength. So there's obviously a long way to go, but we have been spending a lot of our energy and funding on infrastructure. So just can't quite understand how we got to this point. The other question I had, well, that wasn't a question, that was a statement, but I just wanted to support what went before me because I think that is the key part of this document. Page 23, there's just a little bit of a query over the recommendation from Audit that that an independent senior level review goes over things, and the management comment was that a staff member lower down would do it and then the senior accountant would be the independent, but have I got that wrong? What is the intention? Are we actually going to get somebody from outside the organisation to do that review, or is it the intent as it seems to read here?
So through the chair, the intention is that role split, and so there'll be a more junior person doing all the legwork, and then the senior accountant will be reviewing. And that, from my perspective, that's a senior role.
So I guess the question is that independent enough that it's inside the organisation? That was just my query on here. When I read it, I sort of think of independent as being an external look in rather than somebody just within the organisation.
No. So through the chair, really, it's just someone that's not actually in the donkey deep in the detail and running the model. It's someone else that's outside the process having a look. It's not necessary that it's truly independent, it's just a separate person. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nealon. I had a similar question there. I wasn't sure if I was being semantically pedantic on that one, but it was a point I wanted to raise, and I suppose just a corollary to that is, was Audit New Zealand satisfied with that management response, or did they in any way clarify or emphasise independent equating to external? Are they happy with that as a management response, is the basic question.
Through the chair, I understand that they were satisfied with our management comments throughout, and we're happy that they issued the unmodified opinion on our process and on the final long-term plan.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak, as I'm not a member of this committee, but would like to be, but that may come in time. Mr. Chair, I don't want Mayor Rachel's comments regarding IT and technology to be lost. I think they're very timely. I really do, because if I made an observation of the challenges we face as a council, I just want to say to you that one of them is in that area, IT and technology. One of three challenges we face as an organisation. So I really want to endorse what Her Worship the Mayor has said, and say to you that I think the ratepayers will respond well to it. And it's part of our vision too, you see, greater performance as an organisation. IT and technology fits comfortably with that. So I'm very, very supportive, and I don't want those comments of Her Worship the Mayor to be lost sight of, because if we're going to run an efficient organisation on behalf of the ratepayers and give them value for money, I think it's an important part. And I do think TDC in with us would be the way to go. And then, of course, going on to where the Mayor finished off and saying a whole of local government view of this would be helpful. So, no, I'm really supportive of it.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I found these two reports very pleasing to read, interesting. There's a lot of content in there. They're quite different to what I can recall in the past, where we have an awful lot more management comment on the points that are raised, because in both of those reports there's a lot, there's a few recommendations, but there's a lot of other comments which are helpful comments to try and improve our presentation in particular in the future. So in the covering report, there's no comment that yes, we believe we can incorporate and take note and improve our future from those comments that Audit have put throughout the report. You are confident there's nothing there that we can't look at and improve with?
Through the chair, as we prepare the next long-term plan, we'll go back through this again and make sure that we take on board all of the comments that Audit have told us, so that they don't need to tell us again next time, that we can, deliver on a better long-term plan next time. Because as you say, most of the comments were minor things that they thought that would be good for us to do to make the product a better product.
And can we learn for the annual plan to take advantage of some of these comments?
Yes, certainly we can use these comments as well through the annual plan. The annual plan isn't an audited document necessarily, so it won't have the audit process over it, but we will be able to learn to make a better presented document.
That's good, Mr. Chairman, and I think, as I said at the beginning, I'm pleased. I was pleased when I was reading through the comments, and I think it's a good précis of how we're going.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Are there any further questions, points of clarification? If not, could I ask that somebody move that the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee receives the report as up on the screen? Can I say thank you? It's good to have the concurrent, the current recommendation visible to all.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move it, and so moving to say that I believe it's a good endorsement of what this council's doing, and we have to have critics from time to time, but I think they should revisit that thing about how we're actually doing.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dahlberg, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this? If not, can I ask all those in favour to please say aye? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move now, and thank you, Jane. Yes. We move now to item 8, which is the quarterly report for the quarter July to end of September. And who do I look to lead that? Tracy, running the table now, so. Thank you, Tracy. Obviously, the report's been read. Some of the changes have been noticed. Some of them may not have been, but thank you for this and the work that's gone in behind it. Is there anything you'd like to add to your report before I open it up for questions?
Through the Chair, yes, if you don't mind. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to the debtors analysis, which was missed from the papers that were given to you. I apologise for that. With your indulgence, perhaps if I could go through the report and point out the things that are different perhaps than to what you're used to seeing, or that we have treated slightly differently, for clarity, if that would help. Okay, then, the first thing is that the carry forwards report, which this committee looked at a while back, hasn't actually been approved by council yet. It's on the agenda for your next meeting, I believe, this week, but we've assumed for the purposes of this reporting that it has been approved. That's particularly relevant for the capital sheet in the attachment. The second thing is, which is quite a difference, is that in order to meet the reporting timeframes, not just for this committee but for every other committee as well, we've had to make some significant accruals in month 3. As this is the first quarter of the year, it's quite a big proportion of the total income or expenditure, but as we move through the year, that proportion will be less. And as the Chair said earlier, this is very much a work in progress. This is the very first one of the quarterly reports to come to the committees. We absolutely do welcome feedback. We would like to keep these reports standardised as much as possible, but having said that, this particular quarterly report is probably a little bit different to the other ones anyway. So please let me know what you'd like to see. The only exception to the quarterly timeframe is the balance sheet. So the balance sheet is actually representative of August, not September, and again that is a reporting timeline issue. I discussed with the Chair last week that perhaps we might be able to fix that for the next quarterly report. The capital graphs that you're used to seeing. They are very similar. We have included a Q1 forecast. You'll see that it is very similar to annual plan, and that's not surprising. At the very beginning of the year, we probably don't have a very good feeling about how things are going to pan out, so that's just including the things we know of at the moment. I know for certain that things have changed since then, so if you just take that on board. The attachments are largely the same as you're used to. The first page is exactly the same. The second and third page is a slight rearrangement to what you're used to, and we are now looking at income and expenditure by committee. So every committee effectively will have more detail that feeds into this overview. And then finally, at the back, attachment 2. So in our previous reports, we have had the major projects report. That is no longer part of this report. What we have instead is a more detailed project report only for projects that have a budget of over $1 million in this financial year. And as you'll see, there are only three of them. I discussed with the chair last week, perhaps we can do something more in terms of looking at the program as a whole over the organisation, to give you more information on that as a whole, and I'll bring that to you in the next quarter. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. What I'd like to do is sort of go through the report from the beginning rather than piecemeal on this, but Councillor Matheson, does that suit your question at this point, at this time, to do that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It depends where the total debt analysis sits.
I'm also aware that you may need to leave before the end of this report, so I'm happy to take your question at this stage, and then we'll go to the centre of go through the report.
Thank you very much. I was just looking at the general debtors 3 months and over, and the one that's making me a little puzzled is sports ground hire. I don't think I've actually seen this highlighted before. Is there any background to this that you can help me with?
Through the chair, I don't think there's any particular background. It's only just come on to this part of the register. It's only just hit 3 months old, I believe. So if it was less than 3 months old, we may not have reported that. And it really is an ongoing discussion with some of the clubs about how they feel about their fees, is my understanding.
Right.
Thank you. So if we can come back to page 34 and just ask if there's any questions relating to the covering report. 34, 35, 30 through to 37. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, on page 35, section 4.2, the third bullet point. And I'm concerned about the situation with public transport and what we budgeted for and what's actually happening. Firstly, when are we going to complete this new system and have us totally responsible for the income and expenditure? Is that coming up soon? Is the contract being changed? When's it going to happen?
So through the chair, there's a report coming to the next RTC meeting, and at the moment it looks like the go live date for the new system and moving to a gross contract is 6th of May 2019. Mm-hmm. So that's the date that we're working to at the moment.
Right, so follow-up question, had this been in place on the figures and the numbers that we've got reported using our system, had this new contract, new system been in place, how would we have come out of it? Would we have been breaking even, or are we subsidising public transport still? Does anyone know?
Through the chair, I mean, this is really just a reporting between a gross and a net contract. We'd have to do some more work to have a look at that in detail, but that wouldn't actually impact on the numbers.
Just, Mr. Chairman, I'm keen to know, as soon as I can, how we are actually going in terms of getting passengers to use our system.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. And I have a follow-up question to that. Is given that this is now effectively the system that's in place for 11 out of the 12 months of this financial year, do we expect to see this compounded at this rate, this quarterly rate, between now and the end of the year?
Through the chair, that would be correct. But it is an offsetting income and expenditure, so it does not have any net effect.
Okay, thank you. It's probably something we're going to have to be reminded of on a regular basis each quarter. Thank you. Any other questions relating to those papers? Councillor Dahlberg.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, can I just as part of the process, I noticed there, like, for example, 4.2, and we go to the second point about the budget income from forestry with offsetting harvest cost. Can we actually, like, put a figure in there? Like, when I read the 0.5 million ahead, but then I don't quite know what the offsetting costs are. I go look for it on page 39. This is page 35 and I see it's 678k, but it would just be useful if I had that information. And that then follows on to the point beneath that where it says when we're talking about public transport tickets, and it says offset saving expenditure, you're left sitting there going, what does it mean? And then we hear now one comment is no net effect. Well, that would just stop me worrying about it. So, you know, if someone can just think, if I'm reading that, there must be public out there who are trying to engage to read these things. By the time we get to that third bullet point, I'm thinking, I'm going to stop reading. You know, so just a thought that would be useful if we look down there. Other than that, I thought this was a very useful document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. I think those are useful points to show that that offset is there relevant. So. Mayor Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to come back to that discussion around the public transport tickets, and I really appreciate Councillor Barker's questions. I think for some context around that, and probably just some commentary for the committee, is this has been a somewhat frustrating process getting the IT systems up to an operational level. So I understand that it's update from Pat yesterday that there's been some good progress in the last few weeks. We have one of our senior staff involved now in the project which is very useful for us. It is involving many councils across the South Island, I think. I'm not sure if it's got any North Island ones, but I think definitely South Island, South Island and North Island. So we're waiting really to get the system underway, and I think it will be a absolute step change in terms of the user-friendly nature of using a bus service. There is nothing better for those of us who do not carry any cash any longer, or very occasionally have money in our wallet because we're into a cashless society, and to be able to have a clip-on and off pass to get on the bus is going to, I think, be a real step change to usage. So we have been pushing as hard as we can to get this through, but we are in a group with many other councils waiting for this technology to go through its trial stages and then get to the go live next year. So yes, it's running well behind what the original contract dates were, which all the councils are committed to, but we do need a system that works if we're going to launch it. So because the last thing you want is a system failure when it comes to you know, the transport system, and building confidence in public transport is around reliable systems, and this is going to be really a big part of the scale up. So from the Regional Transport Committee's point of view, I know Councillor Rutledge has been very keen to get this underway, and big priority for him, and it'll be coupled again with a real looking at with the government policy statement on priorities for public transport and messages from NZTA of how much more we can get into our system to get as many people as possible using our public transport system, because from an environmental point of view and from a network point of view, that's all good news.
Thank you. And are there any other questions relating to the report? I have one, which I think, thank you, Councillor. I'll finish mine now that I've started, then come back to you. Mine, I think, is probably best addressed to the Chief Executive, and that's 4.6 key performance indicators, noting, accepting this as a first quarter, but a forecast of 64% on track to achieve the target by the end of the financial year. And then when you look at the pie chart on 37, there's still another 30% that are not yet measured. Can you just talk us through that and what your expectation is regarding this towards the year end? And you know, are we sort of setting ourselves at a target of 64% of it now, or how does this work? Can you just interpret that for me, please, Pat?
So as we've worked through these quarterly reports, particularly to the committees, that if not measured yet simply means that well, it hasn't been measured, but we think we're okay, then that's what we put. But if we think that we're in trouble, if for example it's a measure that we've failed 3 years in a row, then we would show it as on track. So we are expecting a better result, but bearing in mind this is only for 3 months of the year. This will progressively change through the year, but from my point of view, it's a good start.
Thank you. That's the key thing. We'll get this sort of chart on a quarterly basis, this pie diagram.
Absolutely,
it's a very useful way of seeing where we're going.
And each committee gets their share of the pie as well, so they can dive down into what's happening. So this whole thing stays front of mind for staff and councillors.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the graph on page 40 of other operating revenue by category, and it's just, to me, it's notable to see that the fees and charges are half a million dollars above budget, and it just highlights that figure of how much income we get from fees and charges, just how much we have changed to charging for user pays. So this is a significant part of our income now, the fees and charges, and there's a big difference there. The question is, it's not covered in the covering report. Is there any concerns, or is there any forecast you can make as to what this trend would be for the rest of the year? Or is there one particular thing which has brought about this, I suppose, good extra income? Forestry?
Through the chair, that is correct. That is what would be influencing that above budget figure, would be forestry mainly, also festivals income.
Sorry?
Also festivals income.
Oh yes, yeah, I read that, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
So, any other questions on those first set of operating income, the overall summary, page 38, and then the expenditure, income and expenditure reports? Any quick questions on those? Councillor Barker. Sorry, Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
The actual dollar numbers aren't.
Through the chair, part of this puzzle is now accruals. So we have to make an assumption as to what's going to happen in month 3. So that is going to throw up some variation. And forecasting in month 3 is a crystal ball gazing affair, I think it's fair to say.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Councillor Dolbeck.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Just questions on page 43. 2/3 down about the public boat ramp at the marina's 100k behind budget. I'm assuming, does that mean in the green rather than the red? So it's...
Through the Chair, the green is actual expenditure. For that particular project, if we were to look at it just by itself, then it would just show that the green was behind the blue.
Okay, so my second question probably, so is the marina project, my understanding where the marina was, it's within budget and ahead of time. When I read that, I'm not too sure it says marina is 100k behind budget. I could be reading just the wrong way around.
Through the Chair, this was at the end of September, would be my first comment. I'm afraid I couldn't make any further comment on that particular project.
Is there anybody who... All right.
Can I just get someone to clarify? Yeah.
Sorry, we'll get the answer on that.
Thanks.
Through you, the Chair, I can confirm that 100k has been invoiced, so that brings that into line now. That was the last invoice for the boat ramp, so that we've received that invoice. We withheld the invoice because of some of the work quality, and so that's finalised now, so that brings it into line.
Okay.
Thank you for that confirmation.
Thanks, that's just useful because that puts it back to, I thought we had a fabulous project and it still is, that's good. My other question would be on page 46, to do with the Neil Park.
Can I just check if there's any on the way through?
Cool, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, just questions on page 41. Tracy, can you just talk me through, when I look at the box, I'm just looking at our borrowing compliance and noting, we're all in the green there, but can you just talk me through when we record around net interest total revenue and net interest rates revenue, and we've got the percentages, the actuals versus the annual plans, can you just talk me through what that actually means?
Certainly, through the Chair. So, net interest is our total borrowings less deposits, and we actually have some deposits at the moment which we probably didn't plan for, I don't think, in year 1 of the long-term plan. These are ratios, as you can see, so against net interest against total revenue year to date and rates revenue year to date versus the annual plan total year. Does that help?
A little bit. So we're looking at the ratios. So we're saying in the case of net interest to rates revenue, so we were anticipating a ratio. Is it a ratio of 6? It is sitting at 6.8. It can be somewhere between 0 and 20%.
That's correct.
But we're at 6.2.
Yes. So annual plan numbers are full year.
Yeah.
Actual are year to date.
Okay, I need to go back and just have a wee reread of that section of the LTP just to remind myself how that all fits together, which I will do. Thank you.
Happy to help if you need anything else.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Noonan?
Oh, sorry, Mr Chair. Look, I just think perhaps that should go in, that it's year to date, the actual, and all year is the annual plan, because as we go through and all the quarters become a whole, it'll make a lot more sense. But along the way, it's going to maybe not look quite as we'd expect, but it'll all pan out in the end, if they say.
Thank you. Any other questions up to that point? If not, we'll move to, where are we? Page 43, moving on to the capital items. And I'll take Councillor Dahlberg's question first, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Murray.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The question would be on page 46 and the Neil Park pump station. I note the time thing, and then I note the project risk. It says no concerning risk to the project. I don't know, I just, in my mind, I recall a meeting probably two weeks ago or something, that we had something happening at the pump station. We had to send some stuff away, and that's what I think caused the delay. Is should we, I said no concerning risk, is that where we are now, or just kind of, I put a question mark on that, it's all, because I remember it came up 2 weeks ago on that pump station.
Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Perhaps I'd look to Mr. Levertis.
Yes, through the Chair, I can answer that. I think this report reflects that at this current stage there are no issues. The result of the, and that's why time is reflected as an orange, is because there have been some delays in terms of equipment that needed to be sent back, but that is no longer an issue. We're still reflecting orange because we will be a couple of months delayed on that project. But in terms of the current status, we've turned the corner. And there's no concerning issues on that project other than time. We're still well within the ability to finish that within this financial year.
Very much, yes. When I'm reading that, I read the call report 30th September, and that comment there would be there's no concerning risk as at the 30th September. So if it was earlier, we don't, there's no concern, that's that quarterly report. That's how I'm reading that.
That's how I would read it. I would sort of read it from the point of view that if there had been any preceding ones, they've been overcome, been handled by the 30th of September.
The management, good. I see the CE nodding his head. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Murray.
Thank you. Just through the Chair, I want to go back to the data analysis if I could. We managed to skip that, but the general debtors 3 months greater, I notice we tag those as being those that are over $10,000 or at risk. And it's those last three words I just wanted to ask a question about. And it may be appropriate to hold this question until we're in committee because it might be commercially sensitive for the answer to this. But are there any debtors on that list that are at risk? And if there are, what are we doing about it?
Through the Chair, they are all being actively managed. One of them is a number of invoices totalling an amount which go back a little while, 6 months or more. But as I say, they're being actively managed. We've not given up on them. I think any other comment might perhaps be commercially sensitive.
Okay, we might return to that in public excluded.
I'm happy to do that if that's the committee's wish. Yep.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Any other questions or any other points relating to Councillor Barker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an update, if possible, on what's called a major variance, namely in community services, the Green Meadows Centre. When is it likely that those final payments will be made?
Mr. Levertis, are you the best person to answer that?
Sorry, through the Chair, can that question be repeated, please?
Basically, when do you expect the Green Meadows Centre to be completed and payments made?
When do we expect Green Meadows to be completed?
So through the Chair, we are progressively working through the building. At this stage, the cafe has already been completed, and we will progressively move through the other stages of the building. We are hoping to be through many other stages by the end of December. But in terms of the entire building, we anticipating that will be sometime in January.
Thank you.
Just a question from me, which I think follows on from that, and it relates to the reporting of these major projects and the stage we've reached. And it's something I've been after for quite a while, is to get some more clarity around some of these. But I'd like a little bit of guidance from the committee on this, because what we're seeing is those that have got $1 million expenditure in this year. Some of those are multi-million-dollar contracts, and for instance, we're not seeing Green Meadows reported as a project of interest through this selection criteria, through this selection process. And I just wonder whether the $1 million a year threshold is the right one to pick, or whether it's a project totals over $1 million, or I'm just looking for some guidance. Also, in terms of the format, which we look at, so the status line in the quality time budget and the status line relates to the expenditure of the $1 million in this year. It doesn't relate to the status of the overall project. Similarly, the 2013 to 2018 actuals figure, I'm looking here particularly at the water treatment plant membranes renewal as an example, shows a total of 4.5 million. I've got no idea what the original budget was for that project, and therefore as a whole whether that original budget is being exceeded. So I think there's, and I'm happy to take some of these items up independent, but I think building on what I think is now a clear and format, I think there's some additions that we can make that will help looking at some of these projects to get a snapshot of the overall project, as opposed to just how our expenditure in this year is going, which is an important factor and one that I don't want to lose. But I'm just wondering if that's the only part that this committee wants to focus on in this relationship, in this area of reporting, or whether we want more. And I'm thinking in terms of using obviously Green Meadows as an example as to how much of a track we want to keep on any major project really across this. So is there any comment anybody wants to make about what might be a useful additions to this format under the invitation of work in progress? Give us some feedback.
Yes, Mr. Chair, look, I would prefer to see, I felt this was sort of, I've gone kind of backwards with this part from what we had previously. I feel like I haven't quite got enough information to be able to see the picture, and I think that is because I do want to see across the total, exactly that issue you were raising. What is the total value of the project, and it may be over multiple years, and in which case, yes, I do want to see those from the total. Because it's a tracking exercise. I mean, they'll come in lumps at various stages, and it depends whether they fall 25th of June or 5th of July as to where you're going to see some of these things. So I'd prefer to see the ones if they are more than $1 million. In fact, I think previously we had them at, do we have them at 500,000? Projects over 500,000? Just asking that. Okay, yeah, in terms of when we had the capital projects reporting.
So one of the things we've been grappling with here is what goes to this committee for an overview, and then what goes to the standing committees to have more detail. So the standing committees, I think, get any project over $250,000 or more than $1 million in its life. And we've also tried to address the issue of funding, but one of the challenges is that your LTP resets your budgets, and so it's very hard to look back at what an authorised budget was from the 2015 LTP as well. So we were starting to try and track forward. If there were other projects of interest that this committee wanted to have a look at, then we can add those on. I mean, we've done that also with the standing committees. So there are some that don't reach those qualifying dollars, but we know that they are topical, high interest, and we've included those as well. So I think in some ways it might be that we've been working through these quarterly reports now for about the last 3 weeks. I think it would be useful if you saw the whole picture that's going to the full range of committees before identifying the holes and making changes. And maybe it might be useful if through that committee process, if there's one that you think should be elevated to audit, risk and finance, then we can easily clip that on, because they are a very standard process. And one of the things that we do pay a lot of attention to is status. And if you look at, for example, page 46, Neil Park Sewer Pump Station upgrade. So that's got orange for time, but because the quality is still okay and the budget's still okay, we have given that status as green. But if there had been another one of those slipped into orange, then the status would have certainly been orange based on its history. So just because it's looking good from this time forward doesn't mean that it's all good. And certainly the committees will see some orange and red as well. And also we're working hard to identify where already we don't think we're going to spend the money, starting to signal that to the council as well. The entire intention is that a whole lot less surprises getting closer to the end of the year. But bear in mind, this is the first 3 months, and the information will get more accurate as we get through the year.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. Look, I think maybe that's a good suggestion, is maybe we need to see the whole suite of them, and I guess that for the chair, for the independent members, whether we can just get a package of those, or just to go through those to see what the whole package looks like. I guess the question I have in my mind is what is this committee going to be doing if it receives a report that says the status is in yellow and red? What is our action going to be from that? So I guess why is this being reported to us? What is the governance step that we take from this report? What do we do with that? So we just need to think about what is our role and our ability to influence the outcome of the status reporting. And I think actually the ability to influence is probably sitting at the committee level, which is why we've been pushing to get these through to the committees, to get the committees actively engaged in reviewing the projects for which they have responsibility, and getting the chairs absolutely across those issues so they can bring matters to their committee for committee decision making. So I guess I'll put that back to you, Mr. Chair. It's a matter of, in terms of audit risk, what is it that we would wish to be doing with the capital projects?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, Chair Executive, I think the sort of suggestion that we look at the whole lot as a package is a sound one. Then we'll see what comes out of it. I think going to your last point, Madam Mayor, is that it's not the role of this committee to do the work of the other committees who own those projects. What I perceive as one of the roles of this committee in this space is to actually have an overview that is not necessarily available to any single one of the other committees. So it's that role of overview that I think is important, with the ability then to raise concerns about any systemic type approach which may not be evident at a single committee level, or raise an observation back to a committee concerned if it's not apparent that it's already there. So it's not for this committee to take up the role of managing those projects, but certainly just to keep an overview of them. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just take up that theme. I think a little bit of consistency would also be of advantage to us. I mean, my eye went to the membranes. We put aside over a period of years a total sum of money, and what I'm not concerned, but what I would be interested when I read it was that we had a budget of approximately $4.5 million, and we're tracking along pretty well at this stage. And if there was any major delays, you'd want to ask the question between that period of 14 to 18, why we've got a hiccup, so that you can read more into it if it doesn't continue to flow. And the same thing for Neil Park's sewer station. That's tracking along quite well. The one that I think we need to put a bit more work into, because we're looking at a 3-year term here, is the one on page 44, which is the sealed road servicing program. And I know from my experience that people like Mr. Levertis and his team, they are actually looking out at a longer period, and that's been signalled in the body of it, but the top part doesn't really give us much at all. There's no consistency there, so you really need to say, what is your budget for 3 years for road sealing? We don't want to know which road you're doing, we simply want to know how your budget's tracking, and then it follows through in the rest of it as well. So I know it's a first chop, and I applaud what's been done, but I think now's the time to start looking at some tweaking for the next one that's coming through in another 3 months.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. I think it's a good opportunity, and as you say, it's a very good base to build on, and I think I'm grateful to officers for taking it through to this next stage. So thank you. Councillor Noonan, and then Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just since you raised Green Meadows, I think the reason why Green Meadows isn't in here is that it's been a multi-year project, and often with these ones they tend to start from whatever's in this year, but I think that there's the feedback, I think, from what I'm hearing, the committee, those projects that are multi-year and we might be in the middle of would still be of interest to this committee. And I guess what I'm thinking is if the reporting like this had come earlier, would we be in a different situation with Green Meadows if it had come to this committee at an earlier stage? That's a question that's probably worth pondering on, because if the answer is yes, we might have found out things earlier, then definitely I think it should be brought to this committee for a review, and then some recommendations to the working committee that it belongs to. So I think that these reports, we need to think about what we want from them, and if it is to flag, and your job is risk, and I appreciate that someone else is looking at the risks across the council. So I think what we need to think of, what is the most use to this committee that will be of assistance to the rest of the other committees. So if we think about that, I would be putting in those multi-year projects, even in some way, shape or form. I'm not sure how that might look, but I think it would be a useful tool. And then this committee can give recommendations to the working committees. I think that would be helpful. I think that was really what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. I agree, and I think you touch on an important point there, is if there is additional reporting that comes through to this committee, it needs to be on the basis of what is going to the other committees, not additional work created for officers to generate specific stuff for this committee. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a member of the Works Committee, so I'm intrigued, so I'll ask the question here, and it's to do with page 45, the membranes. They actually got a value. They're going to the NRSBU. It looks like at no cost to the NRSBU, but I'm quite surprised and pleased to learn that they look like they have a value and someone else can use them. Can I get a bit of an explanation of how they're going to be used, and what is the saving to the NRSBU?
So through the chair, I can answer that. The idea, I was approached by the acting general manager of the NRSBU asking what we were going to do with the membranes that were going to be removed. Ordinarily, they would have gone to landfill because the supplier is not keen at all, or doesn't support those membranes being used in any other application if it is not owned by the Nelson City Council. So we were planning to take those to the landfill, and the opportunity arose with the acting general manager wanting to protect the ability to do something with those membranes at the NRSB at Bell Island. I'm unsure what he plans to do with those, but the problem is, or the issue is, that once they are removed, they need to be stored They need to be stored in a very specific manner. They need to be wrapped in plastic. They need to be kept moist, and they are currently being taken out. So the opportunity exists, rather than take them to landfill, that they be given over to the NRSBU. It's still an NCC ownership granted with TDC, but the manufacturer was happy that be the case. As to what they plan to do at this stage, I'm unsure of the details, but there is a potential that they could use them in some form that will assist the treatment. So it's a win-win. At this moment in time, all they're doing is storing them.
Thank you, Mr. Levertis. Councillor Barker.
I guess if there's an opportunity for a financial transaction, it'll be taken.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of officers in relation to the quarterly corporate report? Again, thank you for the changes that have happened. I think you can see from the questions that they're very much on the right lines, and we're getting there, so well done again to that, and we'll evolve as things evolve, particularly through the other committees. So, thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, I'd ask that somebody move that the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee Subcommittee receives the quarterly report. Thank you, Councillor Barker. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Dahlberg. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Ms. Hughes. And we move to item 9, the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Performance Report. And welcome, Mr. Hughes. Malcolm Hughes, thank you. Welcome, Malcolm. Any updates or comments on your report before I open it for questions?
I actually have a couple of brief comments on purchase updates for the last month since the report was written at that sort of period. Nothing significant. 4.3 on next and a great drill, all that was a success. And the mental health awareness month of activities were planned was also a success with quite a bit of participation in the aerobic section.
Thank you. I'll open up the Health, Safety, Wellbeing Performance Report for questions. Councillor Barker.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Going to page 53, looking at the current year, the numbers of public incidents quite surprises me. The April-June period, it was the greater part of the reported incidents with members of the public, and the only explanation is about odours from our sewer. What other incidents affecting the public have actually been involved?
So through the chair, the odours from the sewer was the only one in this reporting period. I can't remember the details off the top of my head from the previous reporting periods that you're talking about. So that'd be looks like about 3 in the April to June. They would have been in the previous report, I'm sure.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Murray and then Councillor Noonan.
Thank you. Thanks again for your report. I just wanted to just make a note on 5.31. We've mentioned that Councillors Walker and Rutledge did participate in the WorkSafe observation at Neil Park. Just wanted to say that I had with my capacity as the chairman of the Forestry Advisory Group, I went on site to a forestry site up the top of the Maitai. And in the course of doing that visit, of course observed all of the health and safety that was going on around that particular site. So while it's not mentioned here, I have done one of these due diligence as well, including asking Mr. Levertis why we were going so slowly up the Maitai. and of course you can't speed because you get caught. But there was far more to it than that. There was obviously PPE and actually going on site evacuation, emergency evacuation, and briefings travelling around the site. So look, I just wanted to say in that exercise I felt we were managing our health and safety very, very well from a point of view of observing these things in actual practice. So just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan.
Oh, thank you, Mr Chair. Look, 5.1, which is your data reporting, but not the overspeeding, which is interesting when you're travelling with a staff member, isn't it? 5.1.1, I just wanted to say that as Chair of Community Services in charge of libraries, that I will be discussing this further with my group manager, so that will be progressed a little bit more. Do you want me to repeat that? I know you were being spoken.
Apologies, I've been distracted. So.
It's okay, I know what it's like. 5.1.1 discusses the security issues at the libraries, and I will be taking that up with my group manager to have further discussions. I don't want to think that that's just been...
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. I'm glad to hear that. Councillor Barker. Sorry, Dalberg. You've been blamed for everything this morning. Councillor Dalberg.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Look, just on that one on Stoke Libraries, I did actually get run by a member of the public who happened to be in that security group, and that was a concern to them. The concern really came around about are we reducing our coverage there? And he's also made a point, it's not only is it the people who actually use the library, there seems to be a security area around the people who congregate. Maybe some of them are doing it because of other activity, making some of the youth out there feeling, I suppose, insecure. So they seem to hover there as part of that because they know something's happening. So I just thought I'd just throw that in, that it still is a concern. I'm interested in the staff's comment, how they feel about that as well.
Through the Chair, just specifically the example, sorry, I was talking to the Chief Executive briefly there, so I missed the first part.
So probably to do with the Stoke Library. You know, I got a call from a person I used to work with about 20 odd years ago who happens to be in that area now. And just the comment was, not only is it the security of the people who go to the library themselves, the library users, he also seems to think that some of the people congregating there and the youth are also doing it from a security point of view, because we've got people there, safety for them. So there's a couple of angles coming in on that. My comment is, at the moment with the security, I appreciate it's a cost. It's covering off a couple of angles that we may not have thought of.
Through the Chair, I'm not aware of that particular issue of people actually congregating there, but I'm also not saying it's not happening. It couldn't, it possibly is happening. And with the youth worker presence there and the activities they're running, it's no doubt that it will be attracting some people that perhaps wouldn't be there normally. And there is, I know through the community partnerships team, there is more work being done on the longer term initiatives to find other activities for these people in Stoke. But apart from that, I don't really have anything else to offer on that one.
Thanks, I'm comfortable it's in the committee's control, and I just want to add that in, that's all, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dalberg. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Chair. On the same topic, I'm wondering, I'm interested to know whether you've got any data about what is happening in other parts of New Zealand with libraries. Are we unique in having this problem with our two libraries, or is it something that society is experiencing elsewhere?
Through the Chair, I have had conversations with staff from various libraries around the country. It varies from region to region. There is definitely other libraries or other regions with significant security issues in the library, some that have security on at all times, and perhaps the manager libraries would like to comment on this one.
Yes, through the Chair, sorry. Just a short comment. I was at a meeting last week, and it was a meeting mostly concerning our library management system, but other topics were discussed, and I can confirm that it is not a local problem. It is a problem that is on a national level, and And we also discussed what kinds of solutions other councils try to make, and it's very much on the same page as what we are doing here. I got some good ideas to take back from that meeting, but just to say that we're definitely doing what other councils are doing as well.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Hughes? If there aren't, would somebody move that we receive the Health and Safety and Wellbeing Performance Report?
I do have one further update, Mr. Chairman, that I did
thank
miss.
you.
So when I gave you verbal updates, I was thinking in October. We had on the 1st of November, we had quite a significant incident at our customer service centre where a disgruntled customer, we did receive warning that he might be coming, so we had locked the customer service centre before he arrived, but when he did come and he couldn't get in, he went back to his vehicle and retrieved a baseball bat and struck the windows with it. So that was quite a concerning incident we've been dealing with over the last few weeks that I forgot to mention earlier.
So if you're wondering why we had a security guard in our customer services centre all last week, that was why, just to make sure that there wasn't a return visit.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Thank you, Malcolm, for that. Councillor Barker.
So in relation to that, why have you put the risk as only medium on customer aggression on page 57? Or unlikely, you've put it as customer aggression unlikely and impact moderate. I would have thought that incident, which I heard about before the meeting today, would have rated much higher finding of high rather than medium. Someone coming to the place with a baseball bat and whacking out windows. This is pretty serious.
Through the chair, I agree with that, and that may be reflected in the next report. Yeah, this happened on the 1st of November, so it's not reflected in the rating here at all. The risk rating that we assigned to that particular risk was at high for quite a period. We a few months ago, decided that we had it under control with the controls we had in place enough to give it a medium rating. We'll definitely be reconsidering that and seeing where we think it falls going forward. The key thing from this particular incident was that the controls we had worked, and it was still quite a close thing, and we're concerned about it. We've definitely looked at everything to make sure that they will continue to work, and that if things had been slightly different, they might still work. But the key thing here was that the controls we had in place did work and stopped them having access to staff.
Thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chief. Just a quick question. I'm just interested in the sense that in the 1st of November, it's relatively recent, but I'm just wondering what's the degree of tolerance that the organisation is exhibiting to that? Was there any kind of follow-up as a direct consequence of that particular incident? I'm thinking, was a prosecution action, for instance?
Through the chair, absolutely. He was arrested later that night once they caught up with him, because he probably realised after he'd bashed the windows a few times that it wasn't a good place to remain. He did go home, got arrested later that night, but he was released on bail the following day. And there's ensuring court action continuing, and we'll try and monitor that to make sure that we take precautions around those times when he might be particularly more upset than normal about what's going on.
Yeah, I'm gratified to hear that, because if these things are allowed to slide and it's sort of the organisation becomes inert and tolerates that kind of behaviour, it's just.
Can I say I have a low tolerance, and we do everything we can to protect our staff, and threats to our staff we have a low tolerance to as well.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Are there any further questions? Madam Mayor?
No further question, but I just wanted to commend Chief Executive and staff on the way they managed that incident. It is very serious, and I certainly concur and support the Chief Executive's view on a very low tolerance in terms of both threats and actions in relation to our staff. The customer service staff do an exceptional job for our community, and I know that they do feel very supported by the Chief Executive and the team, and just want to really endorse and commend everyone who managed that incident extremely well, and as proactively as was possible for that occasion. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I'll ask then for somebody to move that the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Performance Report be received. Or did we? We haven't done that, have we? We haven't had a mover and seconder for that, no? Councillor Delberg, thank you. Seconder, Mr. Murray. Any further discussion? Not all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Matthias. Well done. And we move to item 10, internal audit, and welcome Lynn Anderson to the table. Good morning, Lynn. Any updates or comments that you want to make on your report before I open it up?
Good morning. Through the chair, the only point that I'd like to make at this stage, other than to receive any questions, it's a very small report as you can see, is just a reminder that the annual internal audit report for 2018-19 is up for council approval this week. And with respect to that, one of the items on that list was an external contractor doing an internal audit of the library. I've got a bit of an update on that. I have had a look into it myself, and I think that from what I've found so far that I'm likely to do that myself rather than to get an external contractor to do it. So that's just an update on that. And the other item, which I'm sure that you're interested in, are the two remaining outstanding audits from 2018. And I can just report that they weren't ready at the time that this report was produced. They will definitely be reported on for the next meeting, and that the work is ongoing, and I think I've commented on that in here too, in relation to a common contract database and looking at the contractor performance issue already. Take any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. No questions for the internal auditor? You did warn us it was a brief report and it's a good verbal update to it. Thank you. If there's no questions, I'd ask that somebody move the report be received. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Seconder for that, Councillor Barker. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Lynn. We come to the last item in the open meeting, the quarterly risk report, and welcome Zach to the table. Welcome, Ali. Any updates or comments that you have to your report?
Through the chair. Yes, I'd just like to talk briefly to some of the changes that have happened in the report you see before you today. We've brought the summary of key information into the main body of the report and included some more explanation around the changes from the previous quarter and how risks have been assessed and the results of those risk assessments for the quarter that we're reporting on through to end of September. There's some commentary included from group managers on emerging risks and issues in their areas of responsibility. And I'd also like to clarify at paragraph 2.4, which I think is page 64, that where I refer to changes that have been made to the corporate report, that corporate report now refers to the quarterly report that you saw as agenda item 8 today, just to clarify that. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you. So open it up for questions. Just one from me while people are getting together. 4.3.1, page 66. I mean, I was interested to see the change by information technology failure moving to the risk rating moving to low. I wondered if that category included the cyber risk, which is a major focus for organizations at the moment, and typically cyber risk is tending to move the residual risk ratings upwards rather than downwards, and I just wondered about the thinking that had gone in this particular case about whether this does include cyber risk and why we feel confident that with that ever-present cyber risk that everybody has, why you feel confident moving it to low.
Through the chair. So I don't think I've included enough commentary about the cyber risk in the risk explanation. I do have an update from the manager IT that I can talk about today and make sure that I've included some of those that information in the next quarterly report. So there's controls that we have in place already relate to firewalls, and some recent changes have been removing local administration from the network. So the explanation that I understand is that if an attack gets through, we've prevented installation of viruses going onto local machines, people's laptops and so on, so that viruses can't be installed that then populate the network. We have virus protection installed on workstations as well as on our servers and our network. We've got regular articles and awareness for staff pointing out things that we're aware of. So, for example, if we're aware of some attacks that are happening in other organisations, we'll get a screen grab of that and we'll tell our staff about it immediately and tell them not to open those emails. So we've got some increased awareness on there, on those issues. One of the things that we've done for our online office environment is put something in place so that when our staff log on to that, the background screen changes when they go there and it shows a picture of Civic House. So staff know that they're on the safe NCC site and they haven't been diverted to another site. And we also have security audits in place, and we have a penetration test scheduled towards the end of this financial year, which again, in language that I understand, it's that we're working with a company and they will try to hack us and see how far they get. And so that will be a test that happens in the current financial year.
Thank you for that explanation. I would just hope, I think one of my concerns in this space is that a residual risk rating of low doesn't result in diverted attention from what is a very serious and ongoing and ever-changing risk. And so I suppose that's one of my concerns, is that the low status doesn't result in reduced attention.
Through the chair, if I can respond to that. So I will keep that in as a key organisational risk for next report as well, so that we don't lose sight of that and we can give that assurance to the committee.
Thank you, Annie. Councillor Barker, then Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in our strategy and communications group, and referring in particular to section 5.4. An increasing amount of messaging across social media related to council activity and performance. Can you enlarge a little bit on what we are seeing as an emerging risk there and who's involved?
Through the chair, I'll ask Ms McDonald to respond to that.
Welcome, Nikki.
Through the chair, it's just a trend we're seeing and that other local authorities are seeing, where there's a great deal more occurring on social media and long tails of conversation back and forth about council performance and other issues, and sometimes misinformation. So it's putting increasing pressure on our communications team to be keeping an eye on a wide range of social media users and making sure that where there's misinformation, that we're going back out and trying to correct that. And we are foreseeing that probably with the coming election, we've been warned by the sector that this is a time when this sort of thing will increase, and it will be even more difficult to stay on top of any misinformation and to be putting out the messages that council needs to.
Yeah, so how can you possibly know who's doing this? What messages are going out on social media? How do we monitor what's happening?
Through the chair, we have staff who are responsible for social media, and they keep an eye on the traffic and where council is tagged. We also, we have a good network, and where council is getting publicity through social media, people are letting us know. So we have people keeping an eye on it, but it's the volume that is starting to put pressure on staff and making it difficult to really keep on top of that, and we expect that that will grow.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you. I've just got two things and then I have to pop away. But the first one was just regarding the computers and the hacking. And while we have the ability to get into a certain amount of the area of the computers, we don't get any of that information of when there might be a hack. So I don't know whether that's something that we're actually safe in our area, but if we're not, maybe we could be advised of the same challenges, or if there's a virus going around, to be aware. That would probably be, I don't know, there are other people as well that outside the staff that have access to limited amounts of the computer system. The second thing I have, I just want to draw the attention to the committee of 5.2, which relates to the community services group, and the commentary that there are significant projects that are stretching the resources and displacing other work. Now, my radar went up really quickly when I read that, and I'll be following that up. Just wanted the committee to know that I'll be following that up with my group manager, and we'll be having a bit more of a conversation about what is being stretched. At the moment, that's probably not fair to ask at this point in time. I think they need some more time to collate anything that is affected, and we'll be discussing that at our meeting at the end of the month. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. I think it's very appropriate that something comes up here and is taken back through the group manager.
I think it's really important that chairs attend this meeting, because that's where we pick up these things, and they're at an earlier stage usually. So I appreciate the work that your committee does.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney, followed by Mr Murray.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to Officer Nikki, if I may. I'm going to ask some questions about 5.4 on page 67 regarding strategy and communications group, and really pick up on an earlier point that the current year has brought higher than previous levels of reactive work in some areas. Through you, Mr Chair, I just want to ask Officer Nikki about when the heading for this item 5 is summary of emerging risks. I really do need to know, and I think the councils around the table do too, where do you rank the person that is sleeping, living in Hardy Street outside our museum there as an emerging risk? I want to know this, particularly with Christmas coming, and the community does too, I think. We have an amenities bylaw in place, and we're seeking legal advice, and I've been telling that to people for months. I've been explaining that to them. So where do you rank that issue as far as your department is concerned, strategy and communication, and as an emerging risk?
Through the chair, if we're looking at it through the lens of sort of strategy and how we deal with the issue of homelessness generally, that is something that's on our radar, that we've been quite active working particularly with central government on how we deal with homelessness. So I was in a meeting yesterday with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the new ministry, and they are looking after the Housing First new initiative, which will be rolled out in Nelson hopefully early next year. We are doing what we can. Homelessness is a growing problem. One of our issues is it's very hard to actually define the extent of it. Anecdotally, it seems to be growing in Nelson. Some of that could be seasonal. We do see an uptick over summer, obviously. but their advice, I guess, is that there will always be a certain amount of homelessness. They think that they can help perhaps 80% of homeless people into a safer living situation eventually. For some of those people, they say it can take up to a year of working alongside them before they're ready to take up the offer of accommodation, but they think that there will always be about 20% who choose for one reason or another not to accept offer that we've made around housing, and the gentleman you refer to has had some offers and been shown some places that he could live, but he's at the moment, choosing not to. So I think we are working closely with the government. They are doing their best to tackle homelessness, but I think there will always be a level that where people are choosing to be on the street, and then it's up to us in the community to think how we manage those individuals. So it's a risk. I think we've got growing numbers at the moment, but I'm very reassured by the approach the government is taking that there are resources at hand to help us with it.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Officer Nicky. That's excellent, and we've applied, haven't we, the amenities bylaws, so that's progressing. We're seeking legal advice, so with what you say, I find a degree of comfort from that. The other question really is around your area too of interest and involvement, and that's, you might think it's strange me asking this, but it's freedom camping, and there is a desire to know through communication what we're doing about this, how we're managing it and so forth going into Christmas. And I'm wondering, through you, Mr. Chair, is it too late? That puts a negative connotation on it. Is it possible that we could delete one of the freedom camping approved sites? And I'm thinking particularly as you enter into the city along Queen Elizabeth II Drive there on the right, a lot of dissatisfaction about our choice of allowing freedom campers there. So from your point of view, communication and going into Christmas, would you see it perhaps sensible if we could review that and have another look at that site? And how are you going to tell the people through communication about how we're managing this year's freedom campers coming into Nelson?
Through the chair, I can only comment on the communications angle. If it was about actual sites, then I think Mr. Ball would be able to comment on the bylaw and how that operates. I think we are expecting to roll out communication as we have in previous years with pamphlets and other information through our usual channels to let people know what's available for those in self-contained, and directing the non-self-contained to our camping grounds or other private providers.
Well, through your, and with your indulgence, if Mr. Ball could enlighten me as to whether we're going to, would have the possibility of looking at removing a site from the list?
I'll ask, thank you, Councillor Courtney, I'll ask Mr. Ball to comment on it, but this I think is actually a matter for that other subcommittee, that other committee, the Community Services Committee, rather than for Audit, Risk and Finance. But if you have a very brief comment you'd like to make, Mr. Ball, from there I'd welcome that.
Through the chair, just in addition, yes, I mean it is obviously covered by the bylaw, so any change to the provisions there would involve a change to the bylaw. And I suppose the other aspect is also just the monitoring and enforcement that we'll need to make sure is in place through EIL for the summer period. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Arlene, I'd like to thank you for your report today. Being one of the proponents the last time we saw this report, which was 2 meetings ago, I believe, we called for some significant change to it, and I've seen that today. And so I'd like to congratulate you and your team on moving this report forward, because it was of some concern to this committee about the quality of that report. So look, I wanted to pass that on. Sitting in behind that is, it's really, really pleasing to see section 5 in its entirety, which identifies that summary of emerging risks. And when I read through that, that certainly resonated with me in terms of what we were dealing with. And of course, if we've identified these as risks, then we can actively do something with them through the controls that are sitting in this paper, which is fantastic. Because as we know, we can have as many controls as we like around these things. If they're not working properly, we are exposed. It's pretty much as simple as that. So, so that all summarises up. And I suppose my concluding comment on it is that from this committee's point of view, I suppose the quality of this report gives us some sense of comfort that our risks are being better managed in the organisation, and I'm certainly feeling that today, and I'm noting that from the tone and the angle of the questions coming from the committee about various bits and pieces. So look, I just wanted to pass those comments and thoughts on to you around the report. Now, my question comes in terms of the journey, and I just appreciate that risk management and risk management maturity, which is what we've talked about in the committee quite a bit in terms of the organisation becoming better and better at this. I just wondered, it's not in the report or anything like that, but I just wondered what your comments are around what do you see as the next step in this process? Okay, so we've obviously done a whole lot of work. There's another wee piece on, I think, but I'm not sure. But what do you see as the next step, or what can we look forward to in terms of improving our risk management processes over the next period?
Through the chair. So our risk management processes that we have in place now haven't changed substantially in moving to this point in preparing a more informative report for the committee to provide that assurance of what's happening within the organisation. We will be working further on better engagement with managers across the organisation, more dialogue around risks and how we want to approach them and whether what we're doing is effective or not. So there's going to be more questioning, and recently at senior leadership team we have talked about those key organisational risks, and we've made some changes to those in terms of the ownership and how we progress through them and how we stay on top of them in an ongoing day-to-day way. In terms of the risk processes, they are scheduled for review in 2019. I think at the moment they're scheduled for Q4 2018-19, and that's something that I need to review in terms of time frame. There's going to be some other changes in terms of making the mechanics of recording risks for our staff to make that a bit easier for them, so that they're a bit more engaged in the process. And for the time being, that's where our thinking is at. I would like us to see us doing a maturity assessment next year in terms of our risk management maturity, and I think that will give us a fair bit of information going forward and help us start to benchmark where we want to be.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Look forward to that piece of work, but this is a great start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Councillor Delberg.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and following up Councillor Mr. Murray's comments, really good to see the improvement on what I'm reading. My question would be, if I was going to take page 77, can I don't know if you're heading there? It's just more to do with the risk area for the council, loss and difficulty replacing skilled staff, and how that relates to a couple of questions here previously, 4.3, etc. If I'm reading that our grid there, and it says medium to low, is that what that grid on the right hand corner, residual risk rating map, medium, and then I see a little arrow? Am I reading that's going from medium to low? Is that how I read that?
Through the chair, the medium to low, so medium is where we have assessed that risk currently, and our intention is that further treatments that we implement will take us to a low risk rating.
Yeah. there's two just things then. If I look at the treatments as intended, it says, yet to reduce, good. And then I see, so we're getting none for this period, but going forward it's reducing. Now I read that, good. Then if I go back then to either item 4.3 or 5.1, which is the biggest challenge to delivering the capital works, is staff resourcing. Kind of, maybe we've moved further ahead than what I thought, but I still thought we've got staff missing in certain areas that would say that we've still got a reasonably high risk of things not delivering, or am I just reading that wrong?
So through the chair. A number of the vacancies in the infrastructure area are due to reorganisation of work teams as opposed to resignations. What's happening as an overall trend across the organisation is we have a reducing trend of turnover. So we've got reducing amounts of permanent staff voluntarily resigning from the organisation, and that's partly why we are reducing the risk rating and why we're feeling more confident in that area, as alongside better tools for staff so that we have better repositories of knowledge that are more accessible, but particularly because of the reducing turnover. That's a trend that's been continuing for the last year, and we've seen a 3% drop from the last quarter that we reported to the end of this quarter one.
Mr. Chair, that's hoping to hear, because we do go to the other committees and we hear the challenges we've got, and it's kind of nice when I see that whole thing where not as many people taking sick leave, people staying on board, then I see it coming into here says we are getting to the crux of the matter. Or are these just pieces of paper? Well done, thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Madam Mayor?
Just a quick comment, thank you, Mr. Chair. Eileen, just wanted to again endorse comments from the other members of the committee. This is a very, very good report, really useful. Really gives some more detail now to the accountabilities, descriptions, effective of control, steps there and the trends with it, and just your overview as well. It's been really helpful. I just want to pick up the commentary on page 77 around the area of risk to council in terms of being compromised by loss of and difficulties in replacing skilled staff, and note the number of how well I think this risk has been addressed in terms of the actions, and certainly thank you for mentioning the trends that we're seeing now in terms of turnover and the reduction in turnover. But if I look through that list and see the proactive way that the organisation is managing this risk, I'm absolutely delighted to see it. It shows the sign of a mature organisation, one that is really investing in staff, and we're starting to really see the results of that. So well done to all of those accountability points along there for the work that's going on into the whole organisation, because we're seeing a recognition of a risk, and it's a risk that exists for every single organisation in New Zealand. We have a skills shortage, and it is growing, and it is not. There's no level playing field here from where we were. It's going to get tougher and tougher, and that is why I think why this page is so important, and to see the results already flowing through within over the last year. That's a real endorsement to the team. So well done.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the interest of time, I'll close it there, but I would like to add my comments. I know I've had the opportunity to make them to you, having seen the report before, but it is a significant improvement and along the lines that we were looking for, and I note as well attachment 2, which starts to give us a little bit of information about just exactly how matters are raised, are put onto there, and so on. So I think you've had good feedback from the committee that it's been a lot of work, but it's been appreciated, and I think we're getting on top of it. So well done on that, Eileen. Would somebody move? Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Would somebody second that? Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the public meeting. Could I have somebody move that we go into public excluded?
To add the reason for privacy.
Okay, yeah, so there is also, because we've added another item to the public excluded, we need to have agreement that there are confidential reasons under section 7.2a, which is privacy of protecting the privacy of individuals. Could somebody please move? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Seconded. Mr. Murray, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move into private session. Public.